Welcome back to another Free Will Photos podcast episode. Today, we're going to be talking about mistakes. We've all made them, and I am one of those people that I try to be as transparent as I possibly can when I talk about photography. And there are a ton of people who will tell you that they've made mistakes, but maybe they won't share exactly how those mistakes can be learned from. And I want you, as the beginner photographer, to really feel comfortable with going out and making mistakes. Just get out, use your camera, shoot, photograph, create, and make mistakes along the way. Now, you're going to need to learn from those mistakes because you don't want to always make the mistakes, but you're not going to know what you don't know until you go and make that mistake. And so today, that's what this episode is all about. Let's go. So first things first, when it comes to making mistakes, the only way that I can really express, making a genuine mistake is you have to be stretching your boundaries. All right. If you are like sitting in your comfort zone, you're not going to make as many mistakes. And if you do make a mistake, then it's even more embarrassing. But instead, when you stretch outside of your comfort zone and you go do something that you typically never do, that's where you're going to make mistakes. And then you're going to learn more about yourself, which is more important than learning about photography. Because when you learn about yourself and how you recover when you make a mistake, you are going to be so much better at life than you are. And photography is just going to be a vessel that helps you get a little bit better at life. And so if there's anything that I can share about that, then you want to make mistakes so that way you get better at life. All right. Hands down, one of the best pieces of advice that I can give right now. The second part is when you when you make mistakes by stretching your comfort zone, well, you're going to want to learn how to fix those mistakes. And then guess what? You've now mastered, or at least you're on the path of mastering a new form of photography, a new level of photography. And so you're going to continue progressing. Even if this is outside of your niche. So if you're a landscape photographer and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go shoot portraits, and then you make mistakes, people are blurry or people have their eyes shut, things like that. Well, guess what? Now you're going to learn more about how to photograph people. So with their eyes being shut, an easy fix to that is to change your shooting mode. So instead of shooting single shot, shoot in burst, and then kind of shoot through an entire segment. You're going to end up with more photos on your SD card. So that could be another mistake, right? Filling up your SD card, and now you aren't able to photograph at the shoot anymore. We'll talk about that. I've done that, by the way. And so these mistakes really do help you grow. That was just a quick example. But since I already talked about that, I want to talk about my first mistake. And this was me as a father. I was photographing my kids playing at the park, and I was new to photography. Like, this is back in 2012. And I bought an 8 GB SD card. I put it into my camera. I went to the park and I put the camera in burst mode, and I was just photographing, taking pictures. I was a great student. Someone told me like, hey, Chris, you need to put your camera in RAW. And so I figured out how to put my Nikon D5200 into a RAW format. And I just went to town photographing my kids. I was having a blast. I don't even know if any of those photos were in focus when I was taking them. I was just photographing because that's what I wanted to do. That's the reason I got into photography. Well, about, 20 minutes in, I would say, to my kids playing, I noticed that I wasn't able to take any more photos. And it never even dawned on me that I could fill up a memory card, but I did. And I was sitting there and I remember looking at the camera, scratching the back of my head. And I was like, so now what do I do? And I went over, I sat down on this park bench and I just started like going through the photos, and I knew I could delete them off the camera because I had learned this already. And so I was making space, but something else dawned on me. This mistake of filling up the memory card led me to not be able to capture my kids while they were still playing. And that's where it really hurt. That's why this became more of an emotional mistake, emotional memory for me. And I remember making this mistake. I remember a lot of details about this particular day, just as I'm explaining it to you here in this episode. And I was a little disappointed because the whole reason I picked up the camera was to capture my kids' lives and, to be able to share this with them as they get older and with our grandchildren and things of that sort. But I didn't have the ability to do that right then. So that mistake, I remember, I felt it. And so, how do I resolve this problem now? Well, one, I don't shoot in burst mode as much because there was like three things that really led to this mistake. First, I was shooting in burst like crazy, and so I didn't need to be in burst. I was just watching a YouTube video or someone told me, I don't know where I got this information, but it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I'll just shoot in burst and it'll be good. And it didn't actually work out the way that I expected it to. The second issue, I was being cheap. I only bought an 8 GB memory card because that was what I was recommended by the person at Best Buy when they were like, "Hey, you're gonna need a memory card. Here's one." It was like $15, $20, whatever it was, but it was only 8 GB. And I didn't even like rationalize like, well, how big are the files coming out of the camera going onto this memory card? And so I went ahead, I purchased it. Obviously, I ran through 8 GB in like the first 2 weeks because I also didn't remove old photos from the memory card after I put them onto my computer. I didn't reformat the memory card because I didn't even know that that was a thing. So you can see how all of these things start to stack up. But the thing that I messed up the most on is that I only purchased one memory card. I didn't buy a large memory card. And since I only had one and it was small, I didn't have a backup. So when I ran out of memory, I didn't even have the ability to go and grab another SD card. And so the mistake, one that I hope you learn from, is now memory cards are way less expensive. For $20, I feel like you can get a 64 GB memory card. And for most beginner photographers, that's going to be plenty for your work, as long as you have a good post-production workflow, which we'll talk about a little bit later because I have another story for that. But 64 GB is like the sweet spot. It used to be 32. I think now we're at 64. And then I think when you get to 128, you're going to be pretty solid. I have a bunch of 256 GB memory cards now. And so it's really hard for me to run out of storage. But because of the mistake that I made early on in my photography journey, I now carry no less than 5 memory cards with me, typically 2 in the camera and if I don't carry a camera bag, I at least grab an additional memory card and I put that in my pocket, sometimes even 2 to carry with me, because I never want to run out of the ability to continue creating, because at that point you lose either data, because now I have to go and look through the back of my camera and delete images just so I can continue taking photos, or I have to reduce from shooting RAW and shoot in a JPEG format or a JPEG mini format, which I lose flexibility in editing later down the line. Sometimes that may not be an issue, but these are all of the things that you start to have to compromise on when you make these mistakes. And I learned this, that I just need to carry bigger memory cards with me and more of them. And so I have like, I don't know, maybe 14, 20 memory cards. I got a lot of them. I have a lot of memory cards. Anyway, I now will never run out of memory. I have never ran out of memory either at a professional gig or in my personal life, like just photographing my kids. I always have memory. And now with video on cameras, this really does help out a lot, having extra memory cards available. And then when I get back again, I have a post-production workflow. And so that brings me to my second mistake that I'd like to share on today's episode, which is it's kind of embarrassing, is because it happened to me recently. This isn't something that I did early on in my photo journey. This happened like 3 weeks ago. So I've been doing this for so long, and I am still a victim of my own failure of a system. At least I failed to use the system, I should say. So I became subject to my system or not using the system that I've created. And so I went out and I photographed. It was just a photo walk. So thankfully, it's not a big issue, but it wasn't a client shoot or anything of that sort. But I went out on a photo walk. And when I came home, I put the SD card into the computer. I got distracted and I never copied the photos from the SD card to my hard drive. And so the next day, I went on another photo walk or another shoot, like I needed my camera. And I remembered that I put the SD card in the computer. And so in my mind, I said, hey, I've already taken the images off of this SD card. And so I put it in my camera. And I kid you not, as I was pressing the format button in my camera, because by the way, this is a pro tip. You should always format your SD cards in the camera and use SD cards for your specific cameras. Like I have SD cards that are for each individual camera. Now that I shoot all Sony, it's not a big issue, but I used to shoot Nikon, Canon, and Sony kind of combined. And so I had SD cards that were specific for my Canon camera, my Sony camera, and my Nikon. But now that I shoot all Sony, it's not as big of an issue because it uses essentially the same formatting structure. But that's just another mistake. You can corrupt a memory card if you jump between cameras on SD cards without formatting properly. So just keep that in mind. Nonetheless, back to me pushing the format button on my Sony camera. And I was formatting this memory card, and I thought to myself, did I save these photos to the computer? And literally, as I'm watching the little progress bar on the back of my camera start to delete the images, I just lost all of those images from the photo walk. And I was actually excited for some of the images that I got during this photo walk. It was during a sunset. And so it was like just beautiful skies. I was really, really loving this. Right. And so of course I go and check the hard drive, and lo and behold, nope, I did not save those images. And I felt a little sad. I'm thinking about it right now, and I was like, I just lost all of those. But that taught me to be slower at formatting my memory cards. I don't need to format them immediately. Take my time, make sure that I actually save the images. Now, when I go and photograph for clients, I have a checklist, a post shoot checklist that I go through. And I do that intentionally to make sure that I do everything consistently. It's a system. And that is why it is so important that you have one for your own personal work. For me, I just said, you know what, whatever. I'm just going to go ahead and throw this in the computer, and I know what I do. But had I slowed down and used a checklist on my personal work, I would not be in the situation that I'm in now, where I don't have those images. Again, it wasn't catastrophic because it was a personal walk. And the cool thing is I have a few images that I snapped on my cell phone. So I didn't completely lose that day, but that was something, it was a mistake that I made. And, I know better. So that's why I find it embarrassing that I did that, because I help people learn how to create workflows, and I teach them the steps that they need to take in order to make sure that they don't lose images. And here I am losing my images. And so I guess that's a fair segue to share that if you are looking for someone to help you with your post-production workflow, regardless of what type of photography genre you shoot, consider signing up for a training call with me where I'll help walk you through a workflow after you get done photographing to make sure that you save your images and you don't make the mistake that I just made where you delete or you reformat your card before verifying that you backed up the images. I'll teach you how to back them up in multiple locations so that way if one hard drive fails, you still have access to your images and how to keep the clutter down. So if that's something you're interested in, check the description box or the show notes of this podcast down below or wherever you're listening in order to sign up for that training call. Now, the third and final mistake that I want to share with you today is really on kind of a more happy note, which is accidents. All right. This whole episode is about making mistakes, but sometimes those mistakes are happy accidents or things that you didn't expect you were going to enjoy that you ended up enjoying. And this happens in the way of an image coming out a little bit blurrier than you expected. And it feels a little bit more artistic. And you're like, how did I do that? Sometimes that could be annoying, but other times it could be the thing that differentiates your image from looking sterile and less, I guess, enjoyable to look at to something that is artistic and creative and people asking questions about how did you do this? And it happened to me, I don't know, a couple years back. Doesn't really matter the time frame. I was photographing the lead speaker at this event through a glass that was sitting on a table. And obviously, you're going to get refraction. There's all kinds of issues with that. But I was like, you know what? I think that this would be cool. And it kind of like magnified the space because the glass it was a wine glass. And the glass also had a little bit of wine in it. And so what was cool about it is that the speaker I was using like the frame within a frame technique. That was my thought process, at least. Well, the speaker was blurred and there was this reflection in the wine itself. And so I looked at it and I was like, man, this is a terrible photo. And so I thought I gave that a reject when I was doing my culling because in my mind, I thought it was going to be good, but I was like, okay, looking at it on the computer, this doesn't look that great. And so I was like, I'm not even going to share this with the client. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. He'll never know that that was a thing. Well, I shared it with the client somehow. I still to this day, I may need to revisit my post production workflows, but to this day, I don't know how it ended up in his gallery. But he seen that image, like all of the other technically and professionally polished and well delivered photos, right? Composition and everything. Those photos, he was like, these are great. But I really like this photo of me through the wine glass because I love wine. And I didn't know this about this gentleman, but he really enjoyed the photo. He had more of a connection to that photo because it was personal. And I don't think he was going to use it for the reason they hired me. I think he just enjoyed having the photo because he knew it was him. And, you could tell that it was him, but it was in a creative way that helped the client feel like there was a personal photo outside of all of the marketing material that he was looking for from the event. And so, again, it was a happy accident. I still don't know how that got added into the gallery. So when he emailed me and he was like, hey, Chris, thanks for the photos. I actually really enjoyed the photo of me in the wine glass. And I was like, what do you mean you in the wine glass? Like, I thought I deleted that one or at least hid it or rejected it. But clearly I did not because it ended up, and I didn't edit that photo because I remember all of the photos that I edited. And so somehow he just received unedited version of an image somehow. So I went back and looked at the gallery and sure enough, it was in there. So along with all the edited photos, the good thing, my saving grace for this particular happy accident is that the photos I didn't add any more rejected photos. That just seemed to be the only one. Maybe at the last second, I subconsciously thought, hey, he would probably like this one. And I just threw it in there. I don't know. But that was a happy accident. And I'm thankful that he appreciated it. And so I know I went through a few different aspects of photography mistakes that you can make, from SD cards to, and the second SD card issue of formatting the card before having a good post production workflow of saving the images to the computer or to your second and third backup locations. And then, of course, a more artistic mistake that turned out to be, it was a shot that I thought was going to come out great. The way it was received was actually really, really cool because it validated something in my own creative vision, but in a way that I didn't even expect to have it validated. Because again, what I thought was going to be cool for the shot actually was not the reason that the person connected. He connected because there was more of a personal aspect. And so I thought that that was cool. It was a mistake that taught me that photography, especially when you are photographing people, that they have personalities, they have hobbies, they have interests. And one of the things that I do now in my portrait sessions or in my consultations when I'm talking to potential leads and clients is I ask them more personal questions because I want the shoot to be an experience that's for them. And that's for my event photography clients, my headshot clients, my portrait clients, everybody. If there's a person involved, I want to know about that person, even if it doesn't make it into the shoot, because at the end of the day, when you are running a business, and this is just for the business owners that may be listening to this. So if you're a beginner, maybe this isn't for you, or maybe you're considering going into the business aspect of this, and you start to learn that the craft of photography and the craft of business, they're kind of two separate things, and you have to find a way to make them combine. So learning to work with people at a personal level is way, way beneficial. That's terrible English, but I'm going to go with it. And so all that to say, messing up is not a problem. You can make mistakes. I recommend that you do make mistakes because it's healthy and it's going to help you grow into a better photographer and, in some cases, a better business person. So, with all that out of the way, and all of the mistakes that I shared with you, I'd love to hear a story of your mistake down in the comment section below. So if you are listening to this on some other platform than YouTube, then I would recommend you come over to YouTube because, hey, one, you get to see me. So that could be cool. But two, there's the comment section, and I do monitor the comments. So if you leave a comment, I will comment back. All right. I want to hear your story of mistakes that you may have made similar to what I have or completely different than what I've shared here today. Let me hear your mistakes down in the comment section. Until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.